Hi, I'm George Crump, lead analyst with Storage Switzerland. Today we're going to talk about how to get all-flash performance with hybrid arrays. So when I talk to IT professionals, one of the top questions I get when they're considering either an all-flash array or a hybrid array is what's going to happen to performance when there's a cache or a tier miss. So let's talk about what that means first. So in a hybrid array, right, you've got a storage system, and that storage system has some number of flash modules in it, and then it has typically a few relatively large disk drives. Now, a all-flash system, of course, has just memory, right? So the question, what happens when there's a cache or a tier miss, what's basically being asked if I've got an application out here and I'm getting data all the time from memory because it's been cached up there, and then for some reason I make a request from that application for data that's not in the flash, it has to be accessed from hard drive. What they're asking for is what's that performance going to look like? Well, the performance will probably be hard drive speed. You know, one of the things I don't like when we have these kind of mixed systems is people will report sort of an average number. There really is no average here. You're either getting flash performance or you're getting hard drive performance. The real thing is to look for ways to really eliminate or at least significantly lower the amount of times you have a cache miss, right? So let's talk about those. There's three basic ways. The first thing you can do is buy more flash, right? And that seems kind of obvious, but flash has become very, very cost effective now, much more than it was 3 or 4 years ago. So when hybrid systems first came out, what vendors would suggest is you buy maybe 2 to 3% of your overall capacity be flash-based. And that's probably okay, but you are going to have some cache misses in that environment as data moves in and out of cache. So what we tend to recommend is let's move those numbers up. We can afford it now, so maybe let's do 10% to maybe even 20% of your overall capacity being flash. So what that means is now I got a much bigger area, right? So instead of holding data in a cup, I'm holding data in a bucket or a barrel. So the chances of me having to go outside to get that data is gone down significantly. So that's number one. Number two is to optimize that flash. Right? So again, if we're dealing with that 10 to 20% number, let's use technologies like deduplication and compression to make sure that we're not putting any more data up there than necessary, and that we're getting maximum efficiencies out of those. So if we can use the sort of industry standard of about 5x, that means I can get a much higher hit rate now out of my cache tier. So that's the second key area. Then in addition to just deduplication and compression, we also want to use techniques like thin provisioning, cloning, writable snapshots, so that we're just minimizing the amount of data that we're dealing with. And again, flash makes all that perform very, very well. The third thing we can do is pin data. Now, this is going to require you to ask a specific question of your flash vendor to make sure they can do this, because not all of them can. But what you want to do, let's say if I have this app here and I've got another app and another app. Maybe I have some virtual hosts here, so I have a host and that host has VMs on it. And so what I'm being able to do by pinning data is I'm going to say, okay, this application's data and this virtual machine on this host's data, I want to make sure those are locked into the flash tier so that they'll never leave that flash tier. Now, obviously that consumes that flash space and kind of dedicates it to it, but for very critical applications, that's the right way to do it, and it makes sure that data doesn't necessarily leave it. The final way, and probably honestly the least popular way, but kind of like taking cough medicine is probably the right thing, is to fix code. Now by code, what I'm talking about there is if these are database applications or things like that, let's look at what's causing the cache miss in the first place and see if it even needs to occur. And many times when we're visiting organizations, we find that queries and indexes are being run or recalculated and they just don't need to. Now that requires some sort of a database analysis tool, but there are several good ones on the market today, and so that can help as well. So that's the big thing with performance and hybrid arrays. It's not necessarily what's my performance going to look like on a cache miss, it's how can I prevent a cache miss. So to prevent a cache miss, there's 4 key things to look for. Number 1 is just to buy bigger flash areas. Number 2 is to optimize the flash capacity with deduplication, compression, thin provisioning, writable snapshots, or cloning. Number 3 is to be able to have a technology that allows you to pin data to that cache tier, so to make sure there are certain critical applications that just never leave flash. And then finally, to really look at the code, get some database analytics tools, and see if you can go in and modify different queries and indexes to be better optimized for a flash world. Thanks for joining us. I'm George Crump, lead analyst with Storage Switzerland.